this is just a short video I wanted to make, and it's basically going to be about future-proofing consoles and connecting up older consoles to HDMI. Now, this is basically going to be working on the premise that as time goes on, and in fact now, really, but as time goes on, there's going to be far and far less televisions around that have older connectors on them. So all TVs are going to be moving into HDMI. So what does this mean? It basically means that yes, you may have a CRT television now that you can perfectly easily use if you have the space, etc, etc, but A, not everyone has the space for a CRT, and B, what if it breaks? You know, there are people flinging them out the door now, and you can pick up one for very cheap or even free. But in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, when these things just aren't around anymore, what are you going to do then? Obviously, it's not going to be an issue if you're a PS3 or an Xbox fan, because all of them output in HDMI anyway. But what can you do if you're a fan of Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Megadrive, etc., consoles of that era and even previous? Well, what I do is I've bought recently a device, and it's a video converter, but it's a very now I'm not endorsing this particular product because there are several different people that make these, and what this basically is it's a SCART on one side and HDMI on the other. Now, this is not going to be for everyone, and quite frankly, if you're going to upscale it anyway, and you don't have a massive collection of games, and maybe you've got, you know, a Super Nintendo with 5 games or something like that, in which case, if you're going to upscale it anyway, you're probably better off going down the emulation route. Purely because it's, you know, you're not going to be playing, you're not going to be getting the pure picture anyway, so just go emulation. It's going to be your cheapest solution overall. But for those that actually do have the consoles and a little collection of games that they like to play, maybe you've got a save game that you want to keep. I don't know, if you've played through an RPG for 60 hours, maybe you want to play it on the original cartridge that you've got. You don't want to start all over again. Anyway, for most people, emulation is going to be the best option. Certainly in the future, it's going to be the best option, as there's no more CRT televisions and consoles wear out. But I've bought this little device, and what it does is there's 2 ways basically you can connect a console up to an older television. One of which is RF, which is normally the lead that came with the console. The other one is, if I can be after finding my prop. Now, these are called RCA connectors, or if you're a very old person like me, they're called phono connectors, because that's what we called them. And yeah, these are, you can buy cables for most consoles that have these on the end. For a normal Nintendo NES, it's these 2 that you need on both ends. But my solution is basically to plug these into, I don't have it handy at the moment because it's plugged into something, a SCART block, and this is a SCART connector here. And what that basically does, it means I can plug it into the back of this thing, that power goes in here, no, HDMI goes in there, power goes in there, and then it outputs to HDMI. And there's all different selectors here. PAL and NTSC is handy, so if you've got a Japanese or American console, it should work with this. It's no guarantee. but it should. Or a Japanese or American television, I suppose. It should work with this. You've got 720 or 1080. There's actually more resolutions than that on this. And then what's that? SCART or HDMI. Now, I already have a solution for HDMI pass-through because I capture game footage on the PS3, and there's HDCP, which is high definition, it's copy protection basically, and which means that I can't capture footage directly. Now, in order to get around that, I have a splitter box that takes out the HDCP. This actually does it as well, although I have noticed that on full 1080 with this, there is a slight lag. It's not very noticeable, but it's noticeable enough. Yeah. But this is a fantastic solution. Now, for my Megadrive and Super Nintendo, I actually only have the RCA leads, which is component. You can apparently buy composite, this is composite. You can apparently buy component leads, which is the red, green, blue, and then the white and red for the sound, which is basically the same as this, but it's got 5 leads on it. But luckily, because I live in Europe, I can use SCART. And what that is, that's component anyway. So ideally what I'm going to invest in the future is a SCART component cables for the consoles, which I don't have. They're reasonably cheap on Amazon. I think they're about £10 each, maybe less. But for a good quality one, you'd want to pay around £10-15, I would imagine. Now, what I've got to refer to my notes here because I've forgotten what I was going to say. Yeah. So what do you do if you've got an even older console than this, like say an Atari 2600 or something like that, which obviously it doesn't output to any sort of it doesn't output to component or composite or anything. The only output it has is RF. Now, apparently you can get these consoles modded. I don't know, I haven't looked into it because I don't have one. And if you want to modify your console, then that's fine. The solution I've found with stuff that outputs on RF is go and buy a video recorder. Any old video recorder. People are throwing away. Even a DVD recorder would do. But make sure you buy one that takes RF in on an analog frequency. Digital tuner is going to be no good because it won't pick up the signal. But an analog tuner, like an old VHS from the 90s, but one that outputs in SCART. And that way it can be upscaled. So you want an input on an analog tuner on coaxial and outputs in SCART is basically how you would do it. Now, bearing in mind that if you do this option on a much older console like an Atari, you're probably going to have issues with scaling and ghosting, etc., because it's the picture's not designed to do that, and you'd be upscaling it twice. And in that case, I would very much recommend emulation. There's no getting around it. You will get a picture if you upscale it. You will get a picture, but it'll be so different from the original. You may as well not be playing the original. Obviously, if you've got lots of games and things like that, or you want to capture the footage, the upscaling is brilliant for capturing footage. In my case, because the capture box I use only does HDMI. Well, it does do component as well, but it doesn't do component at full HD. So it won't do component at 1080, it only does it at 720, which is okay, it's fair enough. But yeah, I think for most capture, I would want to do 1080 if I can, unless it looks stupid. I'm not sure actually if this changes the aspect. I'm pretty sure it does change the aspect as well, this little box. But yeah, you can find these online, HD video converters. There's plenty of different companies make them. This one's actually quite solid. It's a nice metal box, and it seems to be built fairly solid. What I'll do now is I'll show a little bit of footage that I captured from my Super Nintendo. Now, bearing in mind that because I've only got the composite cables, the picture is going to be a lot brighter, because it's a complicated reason, but basically it's due to a lack of resistance that you would normally get through normal means because of the upscaling. So the picture is much brighter than it should be, because I'm using inferior cables basically than what a SCART really should be. Because this box here is looking for a SCART input, so it's looking for a component input, and all it's getting is a composite signal, so it's not doing its job 100% as it should be. But I'll play the footage from a quick run around SimCity that I did, purely, well, A, because I had the game at hand, and B, because there's enough sort of going on in just the beginning startup of SimCity that it can show off. It can show the stills. It's got flashy bits on the title screen. It's got moving stuff. You know, you can see exactly what sort of picture I'm getting, and pretty much what was captured was the picture that was coming through to the television. So yeah, you can judge for yourself based on the footage. And that's about all I've got to say on that. So yeah, I'm probably going to edit some of this down, to be fair. Get rid of the mistakes. But if you like this video, then I will be uploading more. And if you want to subscribe, please do. There'll be other stuff coming up. So I'll see you in the next video. Right, so here's SimCity. And as you can see, it's 1280 by 720, so that's 720p, 50 Hertz. Because obviously it's a PAL console. The game would not look good at 60. Now, it's very bright, but the colours and the movement is mostly okay, I think. So I'm just going to do some moving around just to show you. I think most of the graphical problems actually, and the brightness, are due to the fact that the Super Nintendo is outputting on a composite rather than on a SCART component. So when I get a SCART component lead, I'm sure that will look much better, because obviously the upscaler box is expecting it to be SCART component and it's not. And I think that's part of where these sort of graphical glitches are coming in. But the sound seems absolutely fine. There's no problems there at all. As you can see, there's a little bit of, I don't know, stuttering, I suppose you'd call it, as the hand moves around. But I'm hoping that most of this is due to the fact that the cable that goes from my Super Nintendo into the upscaler box isn't very good. So I'm going to resolve that with a new cable. But I mean, the game is perfectly playable. There's absolutely no problem. The only thing I did find, that obviously I can't show that in the recording, because this was recorded direct on the HDMI feed. I did find I had to turn the brightness down on my television somewhat. Obviously I can't do this for the YouTube recording because there's no such settings on my game capture box. But yeah, so you know, it's perfectly fine, really. Perfectly playable, absolutely no problems, and brilliant for capturing as well. But again, 720p, purely because 1080, I mean, a Super Nintendo scaled up to 720 is one thing, 1080, it just didn't look right. And there we go. See you soon. Goodbye.